100 warships, gone. That's the number CENTCOM put on the board by day 16 of Operation Epic Fury. Over 6,000 combat flights. More than 7,000 targets struck inside Iran. The Soleimani-class catamarans, all four of them, an entire class of Iranian warships, built with vertical launch systems, built to be Iran's most capable surface combatants, destroyed. The fast attack missile craft, the mine layers, the logistics ships, the patrol boats. The Iris Dina, a frigate that had just attended a multilateral naval exercise in India, torpedoed and sunk 40 nautical miles off Sri Lanka by an American submarine, the first time the U.S. Navy had put a torpedo into an enemy ship since 1945. The numbers are real. The footage is real. The satellite imagery is real. By any conventional measure of naval warfare, Iran's surface fleet has been effectively eliminated. And yet, the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. Commercial shipping through the strait has dropped by 97%. Tankers that normally carry 1/5 of the world's seaborne oil are sitting at anchor. Insurance premiums for any vessel attempting transit have spiked 300%. Iran's new supreme leader Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei declared publicly that the blockade would continue, that Hormuz is a lever, and that lever stays pulled. A navy that no longer exists is still choking the world's most critical energy corridor. That contradiction is not an accident. It is not a failure of American firepower. It is the product of 40 years of Iranian strategic planning built around a single brutal insight that very few people in Washington have been willing to say clearly. Iran never needed a navy to close the strait. It needed the threat of one. To understand what Iran actually built and what destroying Iran's navy does and does not mean, you have to go back further than this conflict. You have to go back to 1988. That year, the United States Navy conducted Operation Praying Mantis, the largest American naval surface engagement since World War II. In a single day, U.S. forces destroyed 2 Iranian oil platforms being used as military staging bases, sank 2 Iranian frigates, and disabled a third. Iran's conventional naval response was catastrophic. In hours, the IRIN, the Islamic Republic of Iran Navy, the professional fleet with the real frigates and the real destroyers, was broken. Iran's leadership drew a lesson from that day. It was not, "We need bigger frigates." It was not, "We need more surface combatants." It was something far colder and far more durable. Conventional naval warfare against the United States is suicide. Do not build for it. Build around it. What emerged from that calculation over the following 4 decades was not a navy in any traditional sense. It was 2 parallel institutions with 2 entirely different purposes. And the distinction between them is the key to understanding why 100 sunken ships has not reopened the strait. The IRIN, the conventional navy, was maintained largely for diplomacy, port visits, international exercises, presence missions. The Iris Dina in Visakhapatnam in February 2026, a flag showing Iran as a state capable of conventional naval behavior. It was never the instrument Iran intended to use in a serious conflict with American power. The IRGCN, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, was something else entirely. Built not to fight the U.S. Navy ship to ship, but to make the waters around Iran too dangerous, too unpredictable, and too expensive for anyone to use. Swarms of fast attack craft. Missile boats that can fire and disappear. Drone boats that cost almost nothing and can disable a tanker worth $300 million. And beneath all of it, the weapon that requires no ship at all. The mine. On March 10th, CENTCOM announced that 16 Iranian vessels identified as mine layers had been destroyed near the Strait of Hormuz. 16 mine layers gone. What that announcement did not say, what the footage of burning boats and the casualty counts and the headlines about Iran's decimated fleet do not capture, is the question that mine warfare experts immediately began asking in professional forums and think tank publications. How many mines did those ships lay before they were sunk? A naval mine does not require a ship to threaten shipping. It requires only that it was placed. A Manta-class bottom mine, the type Iran has operated for decades, sits on the seafloor at depths up to 200 meters, waiting. It carries no radio signal. It emits no radar return. It responds to the acoustic signature, the magnetic field, and the pressure wave of a ship passing overhead. And it has a discrimination circuit that can be programmed to ignore certain vessel types while triggering on others. You can set one to wait for a specific class of tanker and ignore everything smaller. You cannot bomb a mine that is already on the seafloor. You hunt it slowly, with minesweepers and sonar-equipped divers and remotely operated vehicles, in waters where every unidentified object on the bottom requires investigation before any tanker captain can feel confident passing over it. The Stimson Center published an assessment in late March, noting that Iranian mine-laying capability was one of the most persistently underestimated dimensions of Iran's asymmetric toolkit. Their analysis was direct. The destruction of mine-laying vessels does not clear the mines those vessels already deployed. It only stops the resupply of new ones. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. The navigable shipping channel, accounting for depth requirements for laden supertankers, is significantly narrower. You do not need to mine the entire strait to close it to commercial traffic. You need to mine it enough that no tanker captain, no shipping company, and no insurer is willing to bet their vessel and their crew on the probability that the channel has been fully cleared. Iran has been studying the geography of the strait for longer than most American naval officers have been alive. Then there are the submarines. By mid-March, defense analysts at the Economic Times, Defense Magazine, and the Stimson Center were all writing versions of the same assessment. The surface fleet was gone, but the submarine threat had barely been touched. Iran operates 3 Kilo-class diesel-electric submarines, acquired from Russia in the 1990s. They are not modern by American standards. They are not quiet by Russian standards. But the Kilo, operating in the shallow, thermocline-disrupted waters of the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, is a different proposition than it would be in open ocean. The acoustic environment of the Gulf, the noise, the thermal layers, the density of commercial traffic, makes passive sonar detection genuinely difficult. Iran has spent 3 decades learning how to use that environment. And beneath the Kilo class, Iran operates something smaller and more troubling in the context of a blocked strait. The Ghadir-class midget submarine, domestically produced, 29 meters long, capable of carrying 2 torpedoes or a payload of naval mines. Fast enough to operate in the strait, small enough to find gaps in patrol coverage that a full-sized submarine cannot exploit. CENTCOM footage from March 10th showed at least 1 Ghadir being struck, but confirmation of how many remain operational and where they are positioned is not something CENTCOM has provided publicly. Midget submarines laid mines in harbors during the Korean War. During the Cold War, they were assessed as the single most difficult ASW, anti-submarine warfare, problem in confined water environments. They were not designed to win naval battles. They were designed to deny, to threaten, to make the calculation for any ship transiting a strait look unacceptable. Iran built dozens of them. And then there are the missiles that don't need ships at all. Foreign Policy's Situation Report on March 12th described what it called Iran's Strait of Hormuz toolkit, with clinical precision. Drones, cruise missiles, and anti-ship ballistic missiles fired from land-based launchers on Iranian territory. The Noor anti-ship missile. The College Fars, a ballistic missile Iran claims can hit moving ships at sea, derived from the Fateh 110 ballistic missile family. The Qadr cruise missile, a variant of which was carried by the Iris Dina before it was sunk. These systems are not naval. They don't need the IRGCN to function. They sit in hardened positions along Iran's coastline, in mountains, in tunnels, some of them mobile, moved continuously to avoid targeting by the same strike packages that have been flying into Iran every hour. They have ranges that cover the entire strait and significant portions of the Gulf of Oman beyond it. Destroy every ship Iran has, every fast boat, every frigate, every catamaran, every mine layer. The land-based anti-ship missile inventory is still there, still operational, still capable of targeting any vessel that tries to transit the water it covers. Iran built a naval strategy that does not depend on having a navy. The numbers from Operation Epic Fury are genuinely impressive. Over 100 Iranian naval vessels destroyed in 16 days represents a pace of destruction that has no precedent in modern warfare. The footage CENTCOM has released, burning catamarans, fast boats exploding in sequence, the periscope video of the Dina's final moments, documents a real and substantial degradation of Iranian surface naval power. What it does not document is the closure of the strait. Because the strait was never held open or closed by surface ships. Surface ships were the part of Iran's toolkit that was visible, targetable, and, ultimately, expendable. The IRGCN leadership knew this. Iran's naval doctrine, as described in its own military publications over decades, explicitly treats surface vessels as tools of harassment and presence, not tools of control. Control of the strait, in Iranian doctrine, comes from mines, from submarines, from land-based missiles, and from the psychological effect of demonstrated willingness to use all three. 20 civilian vessels struck or threatened. Shipping dropped 97%. Insurance premiums at 300% above pre-war rates. And Iran's supreme leader on camera, telling the world the lever stays pulled. You don't need a fleet to do that. You need the right weapon in the right water, and the credibility to use it. Iran has spent 4 decades making sure it had both. Here is the strategic reality that no press briefing from CENTCOM has addressed directly. The maritime campaign that Operation Epic Fury has conducted against Iran's surface fleet was necessary. Eliminating the Soleimani-class catamarans removes Iran's most capable anti-ship missile platforms from the surface equation. Destroying the mine layers reduces, though it does not eliminate, Iran's ability to resupply existing minefields. Sinking the Iris Dina removed a power projection asset from the Indian Ocean corridor. These were real military achievements with real strategic value, but the assessment that destroying Iran's navy would reopen the strait reflected a fundamental misreading of what Iran's navy was actually for. The surface fleet was not the mechanism of Hormuz control. It was the decoy, the piece that could be destroyed without surrendering the position. The mines are still on the bottom. The Ghadir submarines are still unaccounted for. The land-based anti-ship missiles are still in their hardened positions along the coast, and every tanker captain in the world is doing the same arithmetic. Even a 1% probability of hitting a mine that CENTCOM hasn't confirmed is cleared is a probability that no insurer will underwrite at any rational premium. 97% drop in transit traffic. 100 ships destroyed. The strait still closed. Iran's navy is gone. Iran's naval strategy is intact. And the difference between those two things, the gap between what was destroyed and what was actually needed, is the most important lesson this conflict has produced so far. A force that plans to lose its ships and still win the maritime battle is not a force that was defeated when its ships went down. It is a force that executed its plan. What does it take to actually reopen the Strait of Hormuz? And does the United States have the tools to do it without an Iranian surface fleet to sink? Drop your analysis in the comments.